Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Jenna Morton.
And I'm Tosh Taylor, and we're getting closer and closer to Halloween. And you know that both of us really do love a holiday. Doesn't matter what holiday.
It doesn't really matter which one, but I do have a special affinity for Halloween. I do quite love Halloween.
Yeah. You more so than me. I'm a Christmas gal through and through, but I can get on board with ghost stories.
Exactly. That's, Halloween, the costumes, the little kid fun, super love that. But the supernatural, oh yeah, that's our jam. That's our jam.
So we thought on the show today, you'll see there's some props here if you're watching it on Rogers TV. Jenna's brought in some of her books, and I actually brought in a mangled version of my Fundy Folklore by Mamie Steeves. So
one of the best books you could ever invest in if you want to know about New Brunswick locally. Like, not all of New Brunswick, but like the Fundy area. I absolutely adore that book. I think it's one of the best things.
And it was like a whopping $10 at the Albert County Museum. So definitely worth the investment. It is 100% written in like old, you can tell that she wrote it many, many, many years ago, and it jumps around a lot. But if you're interested in the history of Fundy, it is awesome. Absolutely awesome.
So well done.
Yeah.
Yes.
I agree.
Yeah, big fan of that book. Big fan of a lot of books, obviously. And we did bring in a few to talk about today because New Brunswick, like I think most Eastern North American locales, is known for its supernatural qualities, right? I think all up and down the coastline of North America, you're going to find little towns, little seaside towns with stories, forests with lots of stories. So if you're into the supernatural in New Brunswick, you may know some of these already, you may not. There are tons to find, and we'd love to hear from you too. If there are ghost stories and spooky stories of New Brunswick that you think people should be talking about, let us know, because if you search for it on the internet, as you did just to see what comes up,
I did.
There are a few kind of top hits, and they're the ones like you can pretty much do the list without even having to look for it. Right?
It's true. I was like, hey, I looked it up, and you're like, number 1, St. Andrews, and it was number 1. Yeah,
yes.
The Algonquin. And I love that story, actually, because I got married there, and that was the story they told us. They were like, you want to get married on the rooftop patio, was the name of it? And I said, yeah, sure. And they were like, well, there was a bride who jumped to her death on that location. And I was like, sounds like good luck. Okay.
And she still is said to visit, right? There are quite a few little ghost stories like that at St. Andrews, and a wonderful tour that you can take if you're staying there. You can go in and do a little tour through the hotel, which, depending on whether you like the stories or not, should or should not be on your itinerary. For my family, it was a yes for me and a no for some of my children.
But you said there was a lighter version.
Yes, when we went and stayed there with the kids, you could book kind of the earlier walks in the evening. I think it was maybe at 6 o'clock or 7, was meant to be more of a family-friendly version. And if you went later in the evening, they said, we might go a little bit deeper into the bowels of the place. We might get a little spookier with the stories, add a little bit more detail. So I would still love to go back and do the later tour and some of the walking tours of the town itself. St. Andrews is such an old settlement in the province, and again, on the water, lots of great stories of things that have happened over the years. And also the setting of one of the books that I didn't bring in, but we've mentioned on the show before, Eric Wilson, who wrote just dozens and dozens of fantastic young adult crime novels during the 80s and I guess into the 90s. He set one of his books in St. Andrews. It was all about a werewolf, which is not really a story that I think you generally hear in St. Andrews, but it's a fun read. If you have young, probably around age 10, I would say that would be the start for that one.
I think that's when Sarah started reading them, and that was actually the one that got her hooked, because she had been to St. Andrews and she knew, that her dad and I got married there, and so then after that she went. I think there's a PEI one.
Yep.
And
Lunenburg Manor. That's a really that one stands out in my mind. It's a great series of books. If you can pick them up, usually you can find them at the thrift stores around for really good prices. Just while we're on that one, talking about places that if you want to get your kids kind of into the world of reading and local, and they love a little touch of supernatural but not really scary. Again, I may have talked about this one before, but this is one of my new favorite books, The Frame Up by Wendy McLeod McKnight. So The Frame Up is this beautiful, slightly supernatural story, but not scary at all, It takes place within the Beaverbrook Gallery in Fredericton.
Cool.
And it has to do with the paintings at the Beaverbrook. And these are the paintings you can actually go to Fredericton and see these paintings. But in the story, what happens is that when people aren't looking, the characters in the paintings come to life and they have their own stories going on. And there's a whole great back and forth between what's happening in the real world and what's happening in the painting world, and this great little mystery story as well. So yeah, if you've got a kid who likes a little bit of crime, a little bit of supernatural that's not scary, and somewhere that you can then go to the place, the Frame Up. Definitely read that one.
Very cool. And you can just imagine the plethora of ghost stories that are around Fredericton.
Oh, yes.
Can't even imagine. Talk about an old history and an old city, and I bet you they pull off some really amazing ghost walks.
Yeah, this is one of the things that I really love about Halloween season is the fact that so many communities come out and do historical walks and ghost walks. And Moncton, of course, has a long-standing tradition of ghost walks with Victorian era specters who will kind of greet you along the route as you go. That's happening again this year. I see Shediac has some ghost walks happening as well. And our friends at the Albert County Museum, they are having a special opening just of the jail, which, if we'll put it in the show notes, but we've done some shows at the jail and talked about the ghost of Tom Collins and some of the other ghosts that are said to be on site as well. They're opening on the Friday and Saturday, the weekend before Halloween, so the 27th and 28th.
That's right, yeah.
$5 a person. You can go and visit the 3 jail cells as well as the upstairs of that building. And, that's one that, paranormal investigators have come and spent time there. It's a very, very much considered a hotbed of activity in the province.
I would say a hotbed would be a very minor way to put it. It
was Tosh's favorite place to film.
I think I had goosebumps the entire time we were in that jail, and every time we go in that jail. But yeah, they just had the ghost show there again the end of September, I believe, and again finding some pretty amazing things on that site. So it doesn't surprise me in the slightest. Even when I drive by, at night, I've been down in Alma a few times recently for some things that are going on down there, and I drive by at night and I kind of crave the lights on in there, because that's part of the stories we've heard of that Tom or whomever is hanging around there likes to turn the lights on in the middle of the night.
Yeah, and if you don't really know the story, like I said, we'll have some links in the show notes, but also if you're into reading, that's where this book comes in, The Rectory Murder. I absolutely adore this book as well because it's chock full of actual facts and details about the case that happened that led to Tom Collins being accused of murder and eventually dying for the crime. And if you don't know the story, I don't really want to give any more of it away than that. You should, again, you can pick up that one at the museum as well.
Can I just ask you, and I know you said you don't want to get into it, but I have to know, do you think he did it? Because that was a big thing, and that's why she says eventually dying for the crime, because it goes back and forth, and actually some Canadian history comes out of this that we still go by today because of Tom Collins. But I have actually been brought into a couple of classes to talk about the case and whether or not I think Tom did it. And I honestly go back and forth all the time.
I feel like there's some really good community stories that are still floating out there that I haven't heard firsthand that I think would sway me towards understanding more as to why people don't think he was at fault for what happened. Yeah, I think there's a high probability that while he was maybe not on the up and up, he was also maybe not a murderer.
Right, yeah. Okay.
So,
all right.
Yeah,
leave
I
that
think
at that.
Well, if he's hanging around, generally there's a reason people hang around. It's not usually because they're, happy with how things turned out.
Okay, you've got to get the book and check it out, or you can go to the Albert County Museum and learn more about Tom there as well.
Yes, they will tell you about Tom.
Yes, they've all made friends with him.
Yes. Yeah. What were some of the other tops? So the Algonquin Hotel.
Yeah.
The jail at the Albert County Museum is well known.
But there's one story. Oh, this one you like, and I remember you telling me about it last year. The French Fort Cove in Miramichi.
Oh, so many good stories in the Miramichi.
Now, is that the burning ship?
There are also burning ship stories there as well. Yes.
Okay. Oh,
yes,
this
there
is
are
the
a lot
fire
of,
ship of the Bay of Chaleur. There
Yes.
it is. That's in
Yes.
Bathurst, the
And-
flaming ghost ship.
And I'm going to say, if you want to know more about the flaming ghost ships, this one is actually one of my favorites for that. So Will o' the Wisp was a book of folk tales and legends from New Brunswick that Carol Spray put out in '79.
Wow.
So when you are reading books from the 70s and earlier, there's some terminology that is not what we would use today, but they're also that much closer to the oral history that was happening at the time,
Very
which
true.
is fascinating. And Carol took the time to actually look as well for what I love is when people reference, well, I found this newspaper article about this story, or some of the stories in here she tracks back to how they relate to Grimm's fairy tales, and the fact that a lot of these supernatural tales that we have, you can find versions of them in every place.
Yes.
And whether or not something exactly like that happened in each place, maybe it did, maybe it just gets, ascribed to some people who live there. So she does that. And she has this really great story about the burning ship in the Chaleur Bay. Her favorite version of it has to do with a set of Portuguese explorers who came in the 1500s. So yeah, again, I'm not giving away all the details because you need to go find these books yourselves and do some reading. But if you do like supernatural stuff like Miramichi, they have like the entire month of October, you guys are just rocking it up there, like event after event, headless ghost tour, the headless nun experience. They've got
So on the list.
Oh, yeah. If you are at all into celebrating the spooky stuff, you should probably just move to Miramichi.
Yeah. That may come from the Irish. I'm just a bit of storytellers.
Just a bit.
There's a story on there that I found today, and it's from Blackville, which is close to Miramichi as well. And it is the one of the cook on the lumber yards that was murdered, and he still
Yes.
howls to this day. Late at night, you can hear him howling in the woods because he's trying to avenge his murder, which freaks me out. I don't know. Honest to goodness, I think I would rather see something than hear it.
Oh, that's a good
I know.
question.
I think.
I think if you saw something, it would be very hard not to believe you saw it.
Right.
If you hear something, I think you could convince yourself it was any number of things.
Yeah, you can always be like, oh, my mind's playing tricks on me, whatever.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yes, I think I would be more frightened by seeing something than by hearing it. But I'm not sure.
I don't know. There is a big black dog just outside of Alma that is seen but never heard. And that's one that I could handle a ghost dog, I think.
You think?
I like to think
Not
I'm
a ghost
tough.
chicken,
I'm
but a
not
ghost dog.
Ghost chicken. Never a
Tosh
ghost
hates
chicken.
birds. Just if you don't know that already, I don't know of a good ghost chicken story. I'm sure there's one out there.
There's got to be a ghost, or someone will make one up and send it in to me, and that would be okay too. This ghost dog, it is called the ghost dog of Hum's Hollow, which is a big thing in Mamie's book. She references a lot of places that aren't called that anymore. So I don't know where Hum's Hollow is in Alma, and it goes back to the storytelling of locals and getting to know the whole story through them, or the story inside the story from all them as well, and what has been passed down through generation. But apparently this black dog on super late nights will cross the road, and it's so long that you see it come out of the ditch and cross the road, and it's on into the other side of the ditch before the rest of its body comes across, and it will turn and look at you with its red eyes and then continue on its way.
And is it meant to be like a forerunner or an omen? Like if you see it, or is something bad going to happen to you, or is it just like you just saw it?
Not that Mamie says.
Okay.
But I'm going to trust Mamie as the gospel on this one. So she doesn't say. It's just nobody knows why the long dog is there, but it's been there for generations. And people started talking about it even before the first automobile came to Alma. So interesting. Doggo.
That reminds me a lot of the stories that Helen Creighton gathered in Nova Scotia. So anyone who knows folklore probably already knows about those books as well. But there's one book in particular called Blue Nose Ghosts that I started reading it when I was probably about 12. And it was probably not the best age to read some of those stories, because I, to this day, like you said, the words black dog, and I'm like, Oh, I can remember reading one about a black dog. Like, there's some of those stories that I don't even remember the full story anymore, but bits of it pop into my head. And I did actually go look to see if I had kept the copy of the book, but I think my father still has it because it was his copy that I took. And so, Dad, if you're watching, I do want the Blue Nose Ghost book. If you haven't gotten rid of it, because that means if you did, I have to go find a copy. Yeah. Because I need that book.
No, he knows exactly where it is, and it's in the mail already. Just wait.
Yeah. But same thing, like just oodles and oodles of these stories that, you know, have these meanings within the community. And that idea of forerunners was one that I was always fascinated by. And, you know, certainly within our own family, we had stories passed down of some people who would have that, you know, that ability to see something before it happened. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you would see something and you would believe it happened, and you talk to someone else, they're like, what? No, you didn't come downstairs and I wasn't laying on the couch. And a week later or a month later, the same scenario would play out. And, you know, that idea of a forerunner telling you that something's going to happen is not always scary, but I just, the idea of that just fascinates me. And I wondered whether or not, the dog was that kind of omen, like a forerunner, that if you see the dog, it means that someone's going to die in the community or something. Yeah. But that's not what we're saying that story is.
No.
So if you see the dog, don't worry about your safety. Just let us know that you saw him, because that's fascinating.
It is fascinating, and I like that. I mean, there are quite a few, obviously, because the Fundy Shore is where a lot of people first settled. We were lucky enough to go and see Slacks Cove not too long ago, and I can imagine that down at the very tip there of New Brunswick, and into Slacks Cove, where it's not inhabited now, barely, I would say. There are quite 5, 6, 7 houses down that way, give or take. I can imagine that there's probably some...
I would say there's some ghost ships there.
Yeah, got some like things still being heard on the shores, like even if it's just the waves lapping against the side of a boat when there's no boats coming in there anymore. I can imagine that still happens quite a bit, or at least I want it to. Maybe I want my imagination to feel those things.
Well, and speaking about, you know, along the coastlines and things too, one of the other places that was on, you know, that comes to mind for a lot of people, especially in this part of the province when you talk about places with supernatural stories, is Gray's Island and the cemetery in Gray's Island, which is in the Hillsborough area. We were lucky enough to visit there together a couple of years ago, and beautiful graveyard. But yes, there's one particular, I don't even know what to, it's because calling it a tombstone is not enough.
No.
It's a memorial.
Yep.
One particular memorial that anyone here locally will have heard stories about, I'm sure already, but if you haven't, yes, the Lady of Gray's Island.
I would call it, Jenny Steeves is her name, and Jenny, the story goes that Jenny was a teenager and she passed away of scarlet fever or something along those lines. Something
tragic, but not uncommon.
That's right. Yeah. So she passed, and her family, being Steeves, if you're from the region at all, know that Steeves are very prominent, and they missed their daughter. So they had her likeliness made out of stone or marble or whatever it is. Some beautiful statue was put there, and she had bronze hands that, rumor has it, were like encrusted with jewels, etc. And then eventually her head went missing and her hands went missing. And there's different stories, especially through kids that grew up in the Hillsborough area, where if you circle the stone twice, you would see blood coming from the eyes on the headstone, or she would tap you on the shoulder.
Hence, supposedly why her head and hands went missing, but honestly, probably someone just looking to make trouble and make money off the things that were part of her.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that was how the story went. But now today, while I was researching for the show, I'm seeing people say that her husband had this and he loved her so much, he spent every day with her, visiting her on Gray's Island. And then when he passed, they found him wrapped around her gravestone, which that one's not true. If you come across that one, creepy as it may be, That is not the true story.
Or is it heartbreakingly romantic?
It is heartbreakingly romantic until you find out how old Jenny was, and then it's creepy. So
Well, because it's not the story. Yes,
Yeah.
it was not. Yes,
Yeah.
a love gone.
it is not. Yeah, it's not a sad love story, though. I'm sure that probably has happened in other stories. And it was just recently that someone was cleaning out a house in Albert County and found Jenny's head. Like the headstone, so nobody knows how it got to where it was, but it is being, I don't know if it has been returned or not. Last we were there, it wasn't there.
No, but it's been a little while, so I'm not sure. And so, yeah, if you're going to go down and check to see, and I'm sure someone's going to let us know, but if you're on your way to check, there is a haunted house decorated this season in Hillsborough, so be sure to look them up as well. They're on the Grays Island Road. That it's just like a decorated house. Every night they turn the lights on, they invite you to come and take a look and enjoy a little spookiness. So
I like that. And if you haven't been down to that graveyard, I know it's weird for us to say what you already said, but it's stunningly gorgeous.
it is. Oh, it's
We
absolutely
had a photo
beautiful.
shoot done there.
Yes.
Like only weirdos do that.
I think there's a lot of people that do that because I think graveyards are fantastic. And
There's
yeah.
something about them, obviously.
Well, they're usually large, beautiful spaces with, well-maintained grounds. There's usually trees around. They're usually a little bit secluded, and I absolutely love reading gravestones. I love walking around and reading and trying to think about who these people were and what happened. And I love when there's interesting things written on someone's stone or something interesting. There's a woman out there who's made an entire career now of going through the United States and gathering recipes that people have left on the back of tombstones, like, mom's favorite recipe, we inscribed it on the back. And this lady goes and makes these things in such a lovely way. Like, it's such a tribute to people and such a great reminder as to why we put information on tombstones, or why we put, pictures of things that were important to them. And then just, neat little stories like so if you go to Resurgo Place, the free meeting house is there. There's a lot of very, very old gravestones right there that you can take a look at. And I was walking through the other day and I realized that there are two gentlemen who do not appear to be related just based on their names, but who died like at the exact same time. And I'm so curious. I'm like, but what happened? Like, was there a fever that went through? Was there an accident that they were both involved in? Like, there's so much more there to find out. And I still want to go and go through the archives and find their names and figure out what happened.
And I think that goes along with anybody that is like us and into genealogy and into family history. I'll share with you the weirdest thing that ever happened to me. When I was a kid, I liked going through our town's graveyard, and it helps that was the way to get home from school every day. So I was walking through one time, as I often did, and I have an Uncle Ollie who I obviously never met because he passed away prior to World War II. He was getting ready to go and got sick and passed before he could even go, but he was in the Air Force. And so I was walking through one day and I saw Uncle Ollie's gravestone, and at the same time, at the corner of my eye, I saw my mom drive by. And it wasn't a close walk home. Like, I grew up in a really small town in rural Ontario, and so it was a couple kilometers for me to get home. So I was like, oh. And I was like, oh, Mom, turn around. And then I looked back over, and then I saw this guy standing there in a uniform. And I was like, and I double taked, and he was gone. And then I kept walking, and all of a sudden, my mom was parked on the side of the road. And she's like, what are you doing in here? And anyway, that was that. And I was like, did you see me? And she's like, no, I heard you tell me to turn around. And I was like, wow, that's really weird. And that was my 16th year of life. It's never happened again. I've never been able to telekinesically talk to my mom ever again. But anyway.
Well, it's because you weren't there with Uncle Ollie.
Apparently, I need more
Obviously,
Uncle
he was
Ollie
part of
moments.
it.
Wait,
Yeah.
Don't come back. I'm good.
I would love to meet you, Uncle Ollie. So there you go. On that note, we're going to wrap it up. Like I said, in the show notes on Pickle Planet, you will find all kinds of links to some of the things we've talked about. And please send us in your favorite haunted spots in New Brunswick, your stories of Uncle Ollie's, and we would love to share them with everyone. Thanks for listening and for watching, and happy Halloween.
Ooh, happy Halloween.